I learned to stay silent very early on. Not the kind of silence that comes from being a well-behaved child, but the kind born from understanding that any resistance would be crushed with a cold glare or a lecture that dragged on for hours. In that beige colonial house on the outskirts of Connecticut, where curtains were always perfectly aligned, carpets never showed a scuff, and glasses were arranged in perfect circles on trays, I lived like a piece of furniture. Present, quiet, and stripped of rights. I remember when my mom made me change out of my favorite red hoodie because she said, "Red looks ridiculous on someone with flower white skin." I was 11 and I loved that hoodie. But the next day, it vanished from my closet without a word. To my mother, Helen Grayson was a project to manage. She was the marketing director for a luxury fashion chain, admired for her taste and impressive inner discipline. At work, they called her a performance icon. At home, I called her the reason I couldn't breathe. My father, Mark Grayson, was a financial advisor with a monotone voice and eyes colder than the marble floor in our living room. He handled the finances of hundreds of clients, but never answered a single question I had about money. Every time I asked about allowance, he would snap. Money isn't something kids should meddle in. Meanwhile, he tracked every dollar I spent in a black leather notebook locked in his desk drawer. I'm the oldest child. My name is Sophia. I'm 30 now. But the memories of those years sit frozen like solid ice in my chest. My family was always neat, orderly, and suffocating. No one breathed without permission. Ironically, the only one who was truly free in that house was my younger brother, Landon, 4 years younger than me. For Landon, everything was excused, forgiven, or conveniently forgotten. Mom said, "Boys need to be challenged to grow." I thought the only challenge he ever faced was finding the remote after flinging it across the couch. He could do anything. Designer clothes, a new laptop, golf equipment. When he smashed the garage window backing out the car without braking, my dad just said, "Youth needs mistakes to learn." Meanwhile, I once got grounded for 3 weeks for coming home 17 minutes past curfew during a snowstorm. I don't remember exactly when I stopped asking why. Maybe it was when I saw my mom smile gently as Landon bragged about skipping class while I got grilled for a single drop in my math grade. Or maybe it was when I realized fairness wasn't a rule in our house. It was a trap meant for the naive. I started keeping secrets when I was 16. My first job? Washing cups at a coffee shop down the street. I lied and said I had after-school tutoring. I hid my tip money inside a fake novel with magnets on the bottom, tucked behind the lowest shelf. That's where I learned to live in the gray zone, where no one gave me permission, but I got to choose for myself. At 18, when I got accepted into community college, I moved out to live with 3 other girls in a tiny apartment an hour's drive away. I brought an old wooden chair, a few torn-up outfits, and one ancient laptop handed down from a distant relative. I thought my parents would explode, maybe even cut me off. But they didn't. My dad just shrugged. "You'll be back in 6 months. Life isn't as rosy as you think." I didn't go back. I found ways to make it work. I took extra shifts at the bookstore, tutored middle school math, and freelanced online writing content. I cut every expense I could, cooked at home, bought secondhand, used electricity so sparingly it felt like living in shadow. But every month, I still saved at least 30% of my income. Landon kept getting his allowance. When he failed his first college entrance exam, my mom planned a 10-day trip to Hawaii to help him reset. When he changed majors for the 3rd time, my dad smiled and said, "Brilliant minds need time to find their path." Me? I was told flatly, "Smart women shouldn't be too ambitious. Stability is enough." So I never told them about my savings account, never mentioned the sleepless nights doing startup projects, or that I'd quietly built up nearly $350,000 over more than 10 years, little by little, with one goal: to buy my first home. Not to brag, but to have a place where no one could control me, where no one could knock at 10 p.m. and tell me I was living wrong. A space of freedom, of choice, of words spoken aloud that wouldn't be rewritten. I never imagined the person who taught me how to hide would be the one to use that very skill to steal everything I'd worked for. The old silver 2007 sedan got me to work each day, even if the engine didn't purr like it used to. I called her Violet, like a pet you can't bring yourself to let go. She never failed me, except for a few dead battery mornings in thick snow. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in South Philadelphia with Bailey, a music teacher who loved chamomile tea and hung wind chimes in the kitchen. The place was old, ceiling stained, the heater rattling whenever the weather turned cold. But it felt warmer than any house I'd ever called home. After work, I wrote technical documentation for a software company in San Jose. When Bailey went to bed, I'd make weak coffee, turn on a yellow lamp, and sit down with noise-canceling headphones to type freelance code on contract through Upwork. Some nights I'd fall asleep at the desk, hand still on the mouse. But each morning I woke up on time, caught my train, returned to my spot. Because I had a goal. I'd planned to save $400,000 before 30, to buy a modest house in a quiet suburb, with a backyard big enough to grow herbs and a wooden table to read at in the fall. From 19 to 27, I never spent more than $10 on lunch. I shopped at Goodwill, furnished with hand-me-downs, and redeemed gift cards from survey apps. Each month, I funneled 35% of my main income into a high-yield savings account. The rest went to living costs, insurance, phone bills, and just enough leisure to stay sane. I tracked every penny on Google Sheets, color-coded categories, built compound interest formulas, and mapped out timelines. When a bonus hit my account, I didn't celebrate. I simply bumped the investment reserve column to $2,500. Saving didn't make me feel rich. If anything, it made me feel more fragile than ever. Like a single emergency, an illness, or a badly angled wisdom tooth could collapse everything I'd planned. But I clung to it, like a climber to a rope. Right before my 29th birthday, I met Natalie at a Women in Tech conference in Austin. She was standing at the cybersecurity company's booth, short chestnut hair, wearing a worn but tidy leather jacket, holding a cup of coffee like the world could wait 5 more minutes for her. I only walked over because their demo board looked interesting. Then she turned and said, "Your team's technical docs are missing the section on multi-layer identity systems." Her tone wasn't sharp or condescending, but it made me look up. That night, we talked for hours at a dimly lit bar. Natalie was a security engineer at a company developing tools for personal financial protection. She laughed hoarsely while telling a story about accidentally wiping a client's entire system log with one mistyped command. I nearly choked on my drink from laughing. I didn't talk about my childhood. Didn't mention my father's black notebook. Didn't say I was living like someone racing against time because I never felt allowed to own anything permanently. We kept in touch. Scattered messages turned into phone calls, then weekend meetups. 3 months later, Natalie moved into my old apartment after her lease in Center City ended. Bailey had moved out for a new job in Seattle, leaving behind 2 cactus pots and a handwritten note. "You two need this place more than I do." Living together cut expenses down significantly. Natalie split rent, and I handled the cooking and cleaning. We had a whiteboard for chores, and every Sunday morning, she cleaned the kitchen while I did laundry. It was strange how freeing it felt to live with someone without needing to perform. Natalie had a habit of reading the real estate market reports every morning, even tracking mortgage interest rates. One afternoon, as I folded laundry, she said, "If you've already got over 300 grand saved, you should start looking at houses. Westchester has some price drops with the market cooling." I froze, the t-shirt still in my hands. "I'm not there yet. I'm short by about 40,000, and it's not even my birthday." "The housing market's not going to wait for your big milestone." She shrugged, then winked. "Besides, sometimes you don't need to be fully ready to start, just need to know you're heading the right way." Buying a house earlier than planned had never crossed my mind, but that line, "don't need to be fully ready," stuck in my head like permanent ink. We began casually touring houses on weekends. No pressure, no urgency. Just stopped by a few listings, took photos, jotted down notes. Then, one day, we walked into a 3-bedroom Cape Cod with gray shingles, a small wooden porch, and windows looking out to a row of maple trees. Natalie touched the kitchen window frame and whispered, "I could install a spice rack right here." I stood in the hardwood living room, sunlight streaming through the sheer curtains. For a second, I imagined myself brewing coffee, Natalie reading emails, a cat napping on the worn leather armchair. The house was listed at $369,000. I had $342,000 in savings. Back home, my voice still shaking, I told Natalie, if I redirect some bonus funds and dip into the emergency stash, I could make the down payment. She smiled, didn't push, just placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "You've gone further than they ever imagined. If you want to pause here and build something of your own, you're allowed." That night, I opened my laptop, logged into my bank, then froze before typing my password. That sensation, a chill up the spine, wasn't financial fear. It was instinct. Something wasn't right behind that layer of login security, and I'd learned to trust my instincts. I typed the password, then stopped. A strange message popped up. New device login at 1:04 p.m. today. I double-checked the IP address. It didn't match my current location. My breath caught. Natalie was on the balcony, laughing into the phone, her voice floating through the slightly open door. No one but me had access credentials. I only logged in on my personal laptop with 2-factor authentication, rotating passwords. The chill returned, like walking into a room knowing someone just slipped out, leaving behind the trace of breath. I disabled Wi-Fi, unplugged the power, and grabbed my phone to call the bank's hotline. A female rep answered with a practiced tone. "We can confirm an unauthorized login attempt to your primary account earlier today. There were also some preliminary queries about international wire transfers. No transactions were processed yet, but I strongly recommend locking your account." I agreed immediately, requested a full credential reset, and set up biometric authentication. 4 days later, I got another unauthorized login alert, this time from an Android device in Bucks County, where my parents lived. I called Natalie right away. When she answered, I said quickly, "I need you to check my laptop, something's seriously wrong." We moved all financial files to an external hard drive and ran a deep scan. No threats detected. But when I asked Natalie to open the terminal and check background processes, she frowned. "There's a non-system shell app running constantly. Weird code. It's sending logs out on a schedule." "Sending where?" She typed a few more commands. Her eyes widened. "A hidden server based in New Jersey. Data's going through a VPN, but the receiver isn't masked. GraysonInvest.net. I sank into the chair. That was the old domain my father used when he still ran his private financial firm, before merging it with a larger corporation. Natalie turned the screen toward me. The logs showed the original IP from 3 months ago. The night my computer froze after dinner at my parents' house, when my dad had offered to clean it up for faster performance. I hadn't thought twice. The program hadn't just recorded keystrokes. It had taken screenshots every 30 seconds and uploaded a folder containing all banking activity, location data, and emails. I opened my account from the clean device Natalie prepped. The interface loaded normally, but the number in the upper right corner hit me like a punch to the chest. Current balance, $0. I checked the history. A transfer of $354,000 had gone through the night before to an account under the name Mark E. Grayson. For a few seconds, I felt nothing. Not rage, not fear, just hollow. As if someone had sucked all the air out of my lungs. Natalie walked over, saw my face, and said nothing. She just sat down beside me and held my hand tightly. I opened my inbox. There it was, an auto-generated email confirming the transfer with a PDF attachment of the transaction. Nothing looked unusual except it hadn't been sent to my backup phone number. Someone had changed the authentication number last week. I pulled up old statements, noticed the IP change, then found a 4-minute call to the bank hotline from my parents' landline. My fingers trembled as I dialed. The phone rang twice before my mother answered. Hello? It's me, we need to talk. I heard the scrape of a chair on the other end. And now's not a good time. My savings account was wiped clean last night. The recipient was Dad. The silence dragged on so long I thought the call had dropped. Then my mother's voice lowered to a near whisper. You don't understand. There's a reason for everything. Your father just did what was necessary. I hung up without another word. My head throbbed like someone was pounding on it with a blunt object. Every night shift. Every $3.50 lunch. Every line of code I'd written through exhaustion. Every cell I'd filled in those spreadsheets. They weren't gone. Natalie looked at me, waiting for my decision. I stood up and grabbed my car keys. We're going. Sophia, wait a second. No, I'm not waiting another minute. The drive to Bucks County felt longer than ever. I drove in silence, each red light snapping at nerves already strung tight. When my family's gray SUV came into view beyond the leafless trees, I slammed the brakes so hard the tires screeched against the pavement. The front door opened as I rang the bell. My father stood there, wearing a turtleneck sweater and holding a glass of whiskey. His face showed no surprise. Sophia, he said, like he'd just seen me yesterday at the grocery store. Come in. I didn't move. Why? He looked at me like a professor explaining a point. Because you're about to make a mistake. Investing all your money in real estate right now is reckless. I stopped you. For your own good. By installing spyware on my laptop? By impersonating me to the bank? I did what had to be done. The rest will be justified in time. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I turned back toward the car. I'll see you in court. He took a step forward. You won't sue your own parents? No. I met his eyes for the first time in years. I'm no longer the child you could write down in your little ledger and silence at will. I left the porch without looking back. The car door slammed shut like the final punctuation to every illusion I had left about the word family. Natalie sat beside me, silent, only glancing over now and then as I gripped the steering wheel hard enough to whiten my knuckles. We didn't go home. I drove to a small hotel near downtown. Good Wi-Fi. No one knew me. In the softly lit room, I opened my backup laptop, logged into a secondary account, and pulled up a statement I'd already downloaded. The current balance in the account my father received the money into? $39,140. Not the $354,000 they thought. Natalie came over, carrying 2 cups of hot tea from the hallway dispenser. You really want to play this all the way through? I nodded. It wasn't just the money. It was the contempt. They think they can control me forever. 3 days later, I returned to the Grayson house. No warning, no texts. My mother opened the door in a cream silk dress, her voice sugary, trying to stay in control. Sophia, I was just about to call you. This is all a big misunderstanding. I walked in. No invitation, no permission needed. Where's Dad? In the library. That familiar room still smelled like old oak, lined with finance books and a wall clock that never missed a tick. My father looked up as I entered, setting his pen down like he was greeting a client, not the daughter he'd robbed of a decade of saving. Here for an explanation, he asked, voice as flat as a freshly sharpened blade. Just didn't sit. Didn't take off my coat. No, I'm here to inform you the money you took was just a decoy. $39,000. I moved the rest to a non-linked manual transaction account. No digital logs. He straightened. His face stayed neutral, but his throat twitched. Reflex before impact. What are you saying? You stole nearly 40 grand, not 350. 4. How does it feel to have your whole control scheme ruined because you overtrusted your spyware? My mother stood frozen behind him, one hand gripping the doorframe, the other clutching her purse strap. I turned to her. You once said, your father always knows what's best for the family. Is best defined as theft, bank fraud, and spying on your own child? My father cleared his throat, trying to regain control. You're overreacting. We had a valid reason. Landon needed that money for his Stanford startup program. It was an investment in the family's future. And what am I? A savings vehicle? Just then the doorbell rang. My mother flinched. No one moved. My father frowned and stood. I'll get it. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. A few seconds later, the library door opened. Landon stepped in, holding a stack of papers. His eyes passed over our parents, then locked onto me. Sophia, you asked me to come? I nodded. You need to hear this. Landon laid the documents on the table. I received the transfer record. At first I thought it was a mistake, but then I saw Dad's name signed as the recipient. I couldn't believe it. My father walked over, trying to sound calm. You don't need to involve yourself in adult matters. I'm 25. I pay for my own tuition. I earn scholarships. I work part-time. I've never once asked Sophia for a single cent. My mother tried to jump in. You don't understand the financial pressure. We did this for you. If it was for me, why didn't you ask me first? Silence filled the room. I looked directly at Landon. The rest of that money is untouched. You have a right to know what happened. But you also need to decide where you stand. Landon clenched his fists, then spoke like someone shaking off a heavy weight. I don't want a dime from your account, and I'll sign a statement if you take this legal. My mother swayed, grabbing the armrest of a nearby chair. My father said nothing, just stood there. Cold, like a statue, unable to meet his son's eyes. I turned to the door. I'll be back, but next time I won't be alone. Just thought it was fair to say that first. My mother trembled. You won't go through with this. Outsiders won't understand. They'll judge the whole family. They don't need to understand, I replied, voice low. They just need to know what's true. I walked down the hallway without looking back. When I opened the car door, Natalie was waiting, printed documents on her lap. The civil lawsuit form, a report for unauthorized access to personal data, and a full bank statement. Fear was gone. Pain, too. All that remained was a cold, unshakable clarity. No one gets to draw the boundaries of my life but me. On Tuesday afternoon, I stepped into the attorney's office with a file nearly 300 pages thick. No one in my extended family ever thought I'd sue my own parents, but none of them had ever asked how many years I'd kept silent, how much I'd swallowed, just to be allowed to live as an independent adult. The lawyer Natalie recommended was Miranda Kessler, a specialist in civil cases involving financial abuse within families. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed but not cold, her tone direct and efficient. After hearing the full story, Miranda closed the file, leaned back in her chair, and said without hesitation, "We'll file based on 4 claims: theft, financial fraud, invasion of privacy, and unauthorized access to electronic systems." We submitted the complaint at the Montgomery County Courthouse 3 days later. A preliminary hearing was scheduled for 7 weeks out. In the meantime, Miranda filed a motion to temporarily freeze the account in my father's name, the one that had received the $39,000. My parents didn't respond directly. Their reaction came through Maxwell Rourke, their attorney. Known from the news for defending a bank executive in a customer data manipulation case, Rourke was notorious for courtroom tactics that leaned hard into family values to sway jury sympathy. He didn't waste time. Their side filed a counterclaim in under 10 days. The claim read, "The defendant merely reclaimed a personal debt owed by the daughter during the years she resided with her parents between ages 18 and 23, based on a verbal agreement between parties." I sat in my office, reading each line of the counterclaim, feeling like I was watching someone write science fiction. I hadn't borrowed a single penny from them after moving out. In fact, I had sent small holiday gifts to my mother from my freelance writing income. No receipts, no contracts, no proof, just one phrase: verbal agreement. Miranda gave a cold laugh at the last paragraph. They're building a morality tale, but we've got the records, a clear savings history, and witnesses. That evening, I called Landon. Are you willing to testify? His voice was strangely calm. You want me to tell everything? Including that time they offered you 50 grand to stay silent. Then I'll say it all. Landon's witness file grew thicker by the day. He sent a detailed written statement via email, along with screenshots of my mother's messages. If you agree to stay out of Sophia's situation, we'll transfer your startup support. Think of it as early investment. Miranda immediately forwarded the evidence to the bank's investigation department, who confirmed that the voice in the account authentication call matched my father's. Natalie's tech team also pulled the entire spyware log, pinpointing the install date and IP address to the exact day I'd left my laptop with my father. The legal framework was forming, precise as a blade's edge, undeniable. A week before the hearing, Miranda received a settlement offer from Rourke's team. They agreed to return the full amount, plus $10,000 for emotional damages, on the condition that I drop the lawsuit and sign a non-disclosure agreement. I read it, set it down, and said flatly, they don't care about my dignity. They're just afraid of exposure. Miranda didn't push me. She only asked, Sophia, what's your end goal? I looked out the window. The city blurred in winter gray, cars gliding through the mist below. I want them to hear me, in a place where the law doesn't treat blood as immunity. The preliminary hearing took place in a modest courtroom, presided over by Judge Geraldine Moore, known for her tough stance on data privacy violations. I sat at the plaintiff's table, fingers gripping the printed documents. Rourke opened with his polished statement. This is not theft. It's a misunderstanding within a family, where parents, out of concern for their child's future, made an ill-advised decision. Miranda rose. Her tone was steady, measured, no theatrics. We're not here to debate family values, we're here to examine actions. Unauthorized access is unauthorized access. Taking money without consent is theft. There are no gray areas in legal definitions. Landon was called first. He took the stand, gaze steady. When Rourke asked, did you ever hear your parents say the money was meant to support your career? He answered directly, they said that, but only after taking it from my sister. His voice was low, but sharp as a saw blade. I refused. I didn't want a cent. And they threatened to cut all tuition support if I dared to side with her. The room went silent. Rourke paused a beat before pivoting, but Judge Moore's eyes never left Landon during his entire testimony. I was called next. After the oath, I looked directly at my parents, seated 2 rows back. I spent 10 years saving, dollar by dollar, hoping to finally own a home. They didn't ask me a single question. Didn't ask for permission. They just took. Like I didn't exist as an adult with rights. I didn't cry. My voice didn't shake. The pain had long since cooled into steel. None of my relatives were there that day. But I didn't need anyone behind me. I stood firm on my own feet. Before the law, I was no longer a compliant daughter under control. I was a citizen, reclaiming what I had built with sweat and self-respect. The verdict was delivered under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights and the clicking of a fountain pen in the clerk's hand. Judge Moore's voice was firm, leaving no room for sentiment or ambiguity. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Sophia Grayson. Dependents Mark and Helen Grayson are ordered to return $39,000 plus $50,000 in emotional damages and legal expenses. Furthermore, the court issues a permanent injunction prohibiting the defendants from accessing, monitoring, or interfering with the plaintiff's financial data, property, or electronic devices in any form. I said nothing as I stood. Miranda gave my hand a light squeeze, a silent reminder. You did it. My father sat frozen in the defendant's chair, fists gripping the armrests, his back still held unnaturally straight. My mother, usually polished like she'd stepped out of a magazine editorial, looked washed out. Her makeup was faint, her eyes scattered, unable to hide the contours of defeat. The judge wasn't finished. She picked up the supplementary file from the district attorney's office and flipped through it, page by page. Based on the evidence submitted by the plaintiff, This case will be referred to the Montgomery County District Attorney for review under state criminal statutes concerning computer system violations and fraudulent financial access. The room turned still as ice. No one spoke. No one moved. As we exited the courthouse, reporters were already gathered on the steps. No camera turned toward my parents. They slipped away through a side entrance, heads lowered. I didn't answer questions. Miranda spoke on my behalf, briefly and clearly. This case is not just a family dispute. It's a warning that blood relations do not exempt one from legal consequences, and that privacy rights don't end when you leave your parents' house. 3 days later, I received an email from an investigative journalist named Carter Briggs. The subject line read, "The Grayson Finances. Behind the Spotlight." He had attached copies of business records his team had obtained. Grayson and Associates, the investment firm, was under investigation for using client funds to cover internal debts. My parents' home had been refinanced twice in the last 14 months. At least 3 lawsuits from small investors were in preparation for filing in federal court. Carter politely asked if he could use my real name in the article. I declined and requested anonymity. He agreed, but added, "And if you change your mind, the story would carry twice the weight." I didn't want weight. I wanted silence after the storm. Natalie popped a bottle of champagne in our new apartment that night. On the table was a transfer confirmation showing the restitution had arrived from the defendants. She raised her glass and said slowly, "For every time they thought you couldn't." I smiled, not a loud one, but a real one. We didn't talk about buying a house right away. I needed time to breathe at my own pace. Landon sent a short message at 10 p.m. "Justice prevailed. I knew you wouldn't let it go. I'm proud of you." Attached was a photo of him in his newly rented student apartment, cardboard boxes still sealed, a bare light bulb dangling from the ceiling. He had paid the next semester's tuition entirely through student loans and part-time work. His expression seemed leaner, but no longer weighed down. A week later, my mother left a voicemail over a minute long. Her voice was raspy, maybe from crying or just exhaustion. "What you did, it cut through the whole family. But if that's the only thing that made you feel heard, then I just hope you can live in peace." I didn't call back. I saved the message. Not to replay it, but to remind myself this had really happened. Truth has consequences. Not only for them, but for me too. Some distant relatives sent me guilt-tripping messages. An old college friend unfriended me on social media, leaving a comment. "It's sad. You sued your parents over money." I didn't respond. People can judge if they want. They never lived in that house, never got monitored from behind a keyboard, never watched family install spyware and then eat dinner across from you without flinching. I live with clarity now. Day by day, transaction by transaction, boundary. 3 weeks after the ruling, Natalie and I started looking at houses again. Not because we felt pressure, but because this time, there was no more fear in our steps. The house we picked was in a quiet suburb on the city's west side. White siding, soft blue trim, a backyard porch long enough for a hammock, and some mint plants. When the agent handed us the keys and said, "Congratulations, it's yours," I didn't think about my parents or the lawsuit. I thought about late nights writing code, solo meals, crowded buses, and felt, this is what all of that was for. I didn't forgive. There was nothing left in me warm enough to forgive. But I no longer carried rage. The anger had been drained through courtrooms, filings, and judgment. In our new home, we installed a small safe under the stairs. It didn't hold much, just some essential documents. But every time I touched that lock, I remembered. The true value isn't in the money. It's in the right to own, to choose, and to say no, without needing anyone's permission. The house we chose wasn't on our original dream list. No wrought iron gate, no stone walkway to the garden. The roof was speckled with moss, and the front porch slanted slightly to one side. But Natalie looked around at the bare white walls, turned to me, and said, "There's enough blank space here to fill with things that actually belong to us." We worked room by room, painted on weekends, installed shelves midweek, looked up how to wire ceiling lights in the evenings, and climbed the ladder together. In the process, we weren't just rebuilding a house. We were stripping away the weariness left behind by courtrooms, stares, and passive-aggressive texts. We held our wedding in the backyard on a soft spring afternoon. No parents attended. No adult speeches, just Landon, a few close friends, and a violinist whose hands shook slightly as he played. Natalie wore an ivory silk suit. I wore a pale blue lace dress. We said our vows beneath the lavender bushes, not yet in bloom. After the ceremony, we sat cross-legged on the lawn, eating cake with plastic forks, laughing like every storm had passed centuries ago. Natalie brushed crumbs from my chin and whispered, "From now on, no one gets to pause the life you're living." My job changed too. At a cybersecurity conference in Philadelphia, I spoke under the title, Targeted by Family, Surveillance from Within. No names, no attacks, just facts. How I discovered spyware, how to trace it, how I responded, how to secure your data when betrayal comes from the place you least expect. After the talk, a tech director from Veritask Secure approached me. She handed me a card and said they were building a new division focused on vulnerabilities and personalized tech. Things like smart home devices, finance apps, and non-traditional surveillance tools. I took the interview and joined 2 months later. At Veritask, I wasn't just an engineer. I was encouraged to lead my own initiative, so I launched Digital Boundaries, a workshop series to help people understand that digital protection is just as vital as emotional independence. Our first event was at the public library, just 12 people in a small room, coding students, a retired woman with a tablet, asking, "How can I tell if someone's reading my email?" I teach people how to detect hidden software, how to check access permissions, how to encrypt data, and how to say no to those who believe love entitles them to control. Landon also grew steadier. He earned a partial scholarship for his MBA program. On weekends, he worked as an assistant at the university's economics library. One evening at my house, while setting a salad bowl on the table, he said quietly, "It's not easy, but earning every single dollar myself makes me feel like I don't owe anyone anything anymore." He moved in with 3 other students, in a place where the fridge groaned if the door stayed open too long and the shower needed 2 full turns to get warm water. But when I visited, he proudly showed me everything he'd bought on his own. A used chair from Craigslist, a makeshift desk assembled from plywood, a bookshelf he'd built by hand. We didn't talk much about our parents anymore. Everyone finds their own way to survive deep wounds. I kept contact to a minimum, just polite emails, a Christmas card, a short message, wishing good health, nothing more, nothing less. Natalie's career kept growing steadily. She opened a small branch for her design firm and hired 2 new associates. I helped her audit the company's internal security systems. Every time I found a vulnerability, she'd kiss my forehead and say, "Don't worry, from now on you'll patch every crack there is." We saved up and bought a small 3D printer for our shared office. I used it to print mini security lock models for upcoming workshops. Natalie printed quirky home decor, raindrop-shaped lamps, and coat hooks shaped like tree branches. Some mornings, I'd wake before her, watch her peaceful face in the first light of day and think, this calm wasn't given, I earned it. Each month, I hosted at least 1 free session at high schools, community centers, or shelters for women facing abuse or financial control. Nobody asked how much I won from the lawsuit. They asked, "How did you dare to stand up?" And I answered, "Because silence has never protected anyone." My story doesn't end in reconciliation. It doesn't need a miracle to be whole. I no longer need them to admit they were wrong. What I needed? I already have. Space to breathe, freedom to choose, and a partner who never demands permission for me to live as I am. On our kitchen counter sits a pale blue postcard, written in familiar, tightly looped handwriting. "We'd love to visit the new house. even just for afternoon tea. No apology, no mention of the past, just a subtle attempt to re-enter my life without using the front door. I placed the postcard in the drawer below the oven, where I keep things I'm not ready to throw away. Since the trial, my parents haven't approached me directly. They've taken more roundabout paths. Greeting cards, packages, messages passed through my aunt or old classmates. Every message carried the same undertone, the assumption that time alone would earn forgiveness. I haven't blocked contact. I don't want everything to rot into resentment. But I've drawn clear boundaries. No one from my old family may visit without notice. No talk about money. No questions about my work, projects, accounts, or savings. I don't negotiate on those terms. Natalie remains calm whenever a new email from my mother lands in the inbox. She reads it with me. No judgment. No pressure. If I decide not to reply, she never asks why. Landon still keeps limited contact. He calls Dad every few months, mostly to confirm he's alive and doesn't need anything. When they ask about me, he usually says, if she wants to meet, she'll call. We have dinner together every first Friday of the month, taking turns cooking and sharing stories. One evening, I asked absently, "Do you think they ever really understood you?" Landon shook his head. "No. I think they only understood the version they created easier to manage." I didn't argue. That answer applied to me too. One late summer afternoon, while preparing material for a session on financial control in families, I received an email titled, "From Your Father." It was shorter than past messages. No excuses, no blaming, financial pressure, or parental responsibility. Just a few sentences, clearer than anything he'd ever said to me in person. "I hurt you in a way that can't be undone. When I installed that software, I didn't just violate your privacy. I shattered what little trust remained. There's no excuse. I don't expect forgiveness. But if given a chance, I'd like to make amends. Not with words, but by stepping back and letting you live your life your way." I read it over and over. I didn't cry. My hands didn't shake. I just felt as if a cord wrapped around my chest for years had been gently cut. Not with a knife, but by my own hands. I typed a reply, simple. "Acknowledge your message. Nothing more needs to be said. What I needed wasn't an apology, but silence and respect." I didn't send a photo of our home. I didn't invite him to visit. I didn't reopen the conversation. But I didn't delete the email either. I kept it as a marker, a reminder that not everyone has the courage to admit wrongdoing, even belatedly. Our neighbors think we're just a normal married couple. One works in digital security, the other in interior design. They don't know about courtrooms, surveillance apps, stolen money, or filmed interrogation. I don't hide it. But I don't let that story define us. It's the foundation, the shadow, the reason I now understand how vital it is for every person to have control over their own life, even when love comes entangled with control. In my sessions, I tell the audience, women whose husbands control every account, students whose parents monitor every transaction, young people forced to share Facebook passwords just to be trusted, that you're not selfish for wanting a space of your own. You're not ungrateful for wanting to say no without having to justify it. Real family isn't built from blood. It's built from respect. I don't want them to become warriors. I want them to stop feeling guilty for standing up. That's my real goal. Not revenge, but to give others what I once lost. The right to boundaries, to choice, and to a whole life. Natalie often comes to listen. She doesn't sit in the front row. She stays toward the back, where she can see me fully. Every time I finish a talk, our eyes meet like a compass finding true north. No applause, no praise, just a gentle nod. And that's enough. One autumn evening, as we cleared the table after dinner, she asked, "If they really changed someday, would you let them back in?" I dried my hands, thought for a moment, then said slowly, I didn't lock the door, I just took away their key. That answer lifted more weight than any advice I'd ever heard, because I no longer needed anyone's approval. To me, family is someone who doesn't need permission to understand you, someone who won't demand forgiveness on their own schedule, someone who, without any blood ties, is still willing to help rebuild you, piece by piece. I lost a lot to get here, but every step was worth it, because what I reclaimed wasn't just justice. It was the freedom to be loved, to live and to exist, without asking for anyone's permission. Sophia's story proves that not everyone born under the same roof deserves a permanent place in your life. Betrayed, surveilled, and stolen from by her own parents, she didn't just seek justice through the law. She redefined what family means. With strength and resolve, Sophia rebuilt her life on love, autonomy, and a mission to help others protect their personal boundaries. A journey from pain to power. What do you think about Sophia's choices and how she faced her family? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories about family and healing.